My name is Bryan Bates. I was a career science teacher who also studied the astronomy of different cultures and worked as a naturalist. I'm here today to share with you about the Navajo sky, images in the sky, the constellations, and what their meanings were. I'd like to do three things today. Number one, I want to give you a basic understanding of the Earth's motion about the sun and the moon that helps us understand what it is we see in the sky. Number two, I want to share with you an overview of the Navajo calendar year. And number three, I want to share about the richness of the Navajo constellations. If we begin with an observation of the observer watching the movement of objects in the sky, we can see that it's the Earth's rotation that causes the apparent movement of the stars within the sky, or the sun and moon. If we step out a bit, we can see that the Earth revolves around the sun at the same time that it is spinning, it is rotating on an axis. That spin is what results in day and night, whereas the revolution of the Earth about the sun is what results in our different seasons through the year. Now keep that red circle in mind, because that red circle there is the blue circle in this diagram. And this is the movement of the Earth about the sun. You can see the sun here in the center. And as we go around, this is the vernal equinox. That's when the equator of the Earth cuts through the sun. And that's the point that we use as our reference system for all measurements in astronomy, whether cultural astronomy or research astronomy. We will come up to the summer solstice and then continue around and come over to the fall equinox, in which case we're looking in an opposite direction as we were at the vernal equinox. We then come down to the winter solstice and back to the spring equinox. Keep in mind that the stars are all out here, far, far away from us. But we will see different patterns through the year because of the Earth's orbit and because of our spinning or rotating. Now, this diagram then gives us a little bit more depth in that you can see the sun in the middle, and there is the Earth. Now see the red, small red circle, that is the Earth's pathway around the sun, the ecliptic, and we extend that red out to this larger red circle, and that's the pathway of the Earth extended out into space where we can see the constellations. The white band here is actually the Earth's equator that is projected into space, and the blue is the grid lines that we use as our reference system. The green, those are the Greek constellations that we're going to see in the context of the Navajo constellations. Now, very quickly, let's take a look at the night sky, because this is our night sky in the winter. And you'll see that Leo is here. And if we go from Leo down to Gemini to Taurus over to Aries and then Aquarius, that's the pathway of the Earth through the sky. That's the ecliptic. Those are the zodiac constellations in the winter constellations. And if we now move to the summer, then what we find is that here's Leo over on the opposite side. But remember that we're the ones that have moved. The Earth has moved. So it makes sense now that it's on the opposite side because we're on the opposite side of the sun. In addition, I want to point something out, that if we go from the tail of Leo, come across to Boötes, that's Arcturus, and through larger stars, we come back over to Pegasus. Now that's going to be of importance because one of the constellations of the Navajo is Inay Thunderbird, and it goes all the way across the sky and is the largest constellation that I know of in any culture. Well, where am I getting the information that I'm sharing with you today? Largely, it's coming from the book Sharing the Skies, Navajo Astronomy, A Cross-Cultural View by Dr. David Begay and Dr. Nancy Maryboy. Now, Dr. David Begay was a founder of the Navajo Medicine Man Society, that would be a Hatathli. He taught at Navajo Community College and has been a cultural consultant with NASA. In addition, so is Dr. Maryboy, who has been and is a consultant with the NASA Space Grant Program, taught at Navajo Community College. I would also like to thank Derek Yellowhair, who consistently came to my classes at Coconino Community College and shared about Navajo astronomy. As we move to this next slide, we get to the Navajo months and what their meanings are. We're going to start with October because that's the beginning of the Navajo year. Our year begins at the end of the month, just after the winter solstice. But Navajo year begins with the change in seasons. So when the winds begin to blow, the first time you begin to get snow. And so you have this seasonal change marking the beginning of the new year. As you come into spring, we see that the eagles are hatching, that they are growing, and then we get thunder. Well, the thunder, which is whooshid, that is the time at which the animals wake up from their hibernation. We come across the late spring and summer, and what happens is that you have the small leaves becoming large leaves on the plants, and a small corn plant becoming a tall corn plant. So notice the pattern here is all based upon changes in nature. Then as we come along to fall, you have the small harvest in late August, September, and then the big harvest in mid-September into October. Well, when we begin to look at the Navajo view of the world, it is both geographically and astronomically centered. So what ends up happening is that in their mythology, they have the dark world, the black world, as the beginning world. Then we go to the blue world, which is the water world, and to the yellow world, which is where life has begun, and there are plants and insects. And then we emerge into the white world, which is where we are now. So that's astronomically, that's part of their life way. But in addition, they also have their astronomy, which is above ground. But then from their Hogan, they are centered to their 4 sacred peaks. And those peaks are the San Francisco peaks that we know here in Flagstaff, Hesperus Peak up in Colorado, Blanco Peak in the east, and then Mount Taylor in the south. And that's how they orient themselves. They use the geography and the astronomy to guide their lives. The Navajo also have all of their constellations. And because they consistently moved about, they had to have reference markers in the sky because they never had a consistent horizon. They never had some place that they stayed for long periods of time. And so the center fire is the North Star. Then there is first man and first woman. And these are the center of the Nahokos. In their way, Huerfano Mesa, which is just northeast of Chaco Canyon, is their center place of home. I'm going to be going through the Navajo constellations, and in every slide, I'll have the Anglo constellation on the left and the Navajo constellation on the right. So this is now the North Star, and you can see here the Big Dipper, and then over on the far side, you can see Cassiopeia. But the North Star is the center fire. It is what provides warmth, heat, guidance, stability for the Navajo family. It does not change in its position, which is why it provides a stability. In addition, there is the first man, Nahokos Baka. And Nahokos Baka is a male warrior. He's a leader. He provides for the family. He protects his home. And if you look at the constellation here, you'll see the Big Dipper, but it's been rotated, and here is the Big Dipper in what we see as Ursa Major. And that is, of course, the Big Bear. If we move on, we come to Nahokos Ba'ad, which is female revolving one, or first woman. And she is the mother, the grandmother. She provides stability through harvesting the food, grinding the food, and preparing the food. She combats hunger by her activities to provide nutrition. And once again, you can see the Cassiopeia, the W-type structure in both the Greek constellation and the Navajo constellation. Deliehe is the Pleiades. And the Pleiades, according to Dr. Ed Krupp of Griffith Observatory, is the most commonly observed constellation or asterism in the sky amongst all cultures. Well, what happens here is that you have a cluster of stars in which you have 6 boys and then a woman guardian wearing a fawn skin vest that portrays the stars of Deliehe. And Deliehe is very important because it is an agro-astronomical marker. The point is that you never let Deliehe see you plant. So it will disappear from the sky, i.e. the Earth is on the opposite side of the sun, as is the Pleiades, from mid-May to late June. That's the period during which you plant your crops. The other thing is that this fawn skin with the spots represents the Pleiades as well. And there's an old saying that you don't kill a deer, you don't kill the female deer until the spots are gone from the fawn. That's when the fawn can take care of itself. Otzi et Otzi means strong, slender one. And this is Orion, the protector of the Navajo family. He is the one who is a hunter and is also involved in providing for whatever they need. Now, if we look at the Anglo constellation, you'll see that we're looking at the front of Orion. But in Navajo, we're looking at the back of Orion, such that the three stars of Orion's belt are actually the quiver of arrows. So it's the same constellation viewed with a different perspective. Otzi et O is the elder who walks with a cane and carries a basket. So with becoming an elder, one gains more wisdom, more patience, more capacity to deal with things that may not work as we originally hoped. The basket is the cosmos, and within the basket are seeds. And those seeds, of course, are the plants that refer to regeneration, to growth, to renewal. Now, there is another saying in Navajo that you never kill a deer until Otzi et O lays on its side. So in late August, we'll see the Scorpius laying on its side. That's when it's time to go hunt deer. The other thing to note is that if you come down, you can see the stars of the front of Scorpius coming down through Arcturus, and then it stops there at the cane. It stops right here. You have these other stars there that in Navajo, those stars are Ga. That's rabbit tracks. And if you ever watched a rabbit, you'll notice how it zigzags around as it runs away from a potential predator. This is Inay Thunderbird. Now, this is an incredibly important constellation amongst the Navajo because it's actually about an essence of energy. This constellation is the same as Pegasus, and Pegasus has this large square. Well, that large square in Pegasus is here in this constellation, but what's different is that we have this large headdress that I spoke about earlier. And so what ends up happening is that every month the Navajo see a new star being added to this headdress. And if you begin in the fall, this one is the nebula of Leo, and then you go through and add other bright stars such that you can never see the entire constellation of Inay at one time. But in March, you can watch the entire constellation if you stay up and watch the movement of the Earth spinning through the night. So what ends up happening is that this is the essence of energy, and this is Thunderbird, and the Thunderbird then awakes the plants and the animals, particularly Shosh. Shosh is Sagittarius, and this Shosh and Inay rise together and transit across the sky. And with the first thunder in the spring, then the Navajo stop watching the sky, the night sky. It's the time at which life is rejuvenating. So this is around the spring equinox. And the thunder, the lightning come with rain. The rain then, of course, provides for the growth of plants that feed the wildlife. Yakaishtaha is the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is important because in January, the Navajo elders will get up early, they go outside to watch the sky, and the Milky Way is lying along the horizon. Then it's called awaits the dawn, because here's this blanket of stars along the horizon that is awaiting the rise of the sun. So it's a heliacal marker. Now, what ends up happening during the year is because of the Earth's orbit about the sun, then the angle at which we see the Milky Way changes. And in August and September, oftentimes it bridges across the sky. The Milky Way bridges across the sky. This is, the Milky Way is used by numerous different cultures. Amongst the Pawnee, this is the avenue for spirits who have passed away to move into the sky. And in fact, we have the same mythology within our Christian religion. Finally, we have to ask ourselves, how did the stars get to be there? And that goes back to a story about Ma'i Bazo. And Ma'i is coyote. Originally, the Navajo gods met at the first hogan there at Huerfano Mesa over by Chaco Canyon, and they brought with them crystals. Now, Black God, who is the most powerful Navajo god, or one of the more powerful ones, along with first man and first woman, took a pure sheepskin and they laid it on the ground, and then they placed these quartz crystals as markers of the stars. And as they sang over them, then the crystals began to glow and they were becoming stars. Ma'i was not invited to this event in which the Navajo gods were placing the stars in the sky in order to provide guidance for the Navajo culture throughout their lives and throughout their generations. But Ma'i saw what was happening, saw something was happening at the first hogan. He went, he knocked on the door, said, let me in, let me in. They said, no, 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 go away. But he asked 3 times, and after 3 times in Navajo, if somebody asks, you have to help that person accomplish what they ask. So Ma'i comes in, and then he says, I want to place a star, I want to place a star. No, 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 said the other Navajo gods. But he asked 3 times, so they said, okay, you can place 1 star. Then Ma'i wanted to place more stars. No, you can't do that. But Ma'i asked, and the other Navajo gods were taking their time. They were thinking about this, and Ma'i got very impatient. So what did he do? He grabbed the sheepskin and he flung it into the air, and that's how we get the stars placed in the sky and how we get the Milky Way. So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And in Navajo, we would say, ahyehe. And I want you to take 4 different points with you. Number 1, remember that it's the Earth's orbit about the sun and the Earth's spinning that allows us to see different aspects of the sky throughout the year, and then associate those asterisms that we see with different weather changes and different patterns in nature. Number 2, the Navajos were hunters and gatherers. They consistently moved around, so they never had a horizon that they could use as a consistent reference point. That's why they used constellations. Number 3 is that the Navajo based their perception and their practices on viewing the sky as well as viewing their geographic reference to where they live and their sacred mountains. And finally, most ancestral people tie their view of the sky back to things that come from nature. And the Navajo have done the same, but one of the critical points is that Navajo and Anglo constellations are often quite similar, and I think there's 2 reasons. Number 1, we're viewing the same sky, but number 2, you also had a Jesuit priest who documented the first Navajo constellations. Well, once again, ahyehe, and would you now please go and learn the constellations of your culture? Whatever your culture is, I guarantee you, you have a very rich history in the astronomy of your ancestors. Thank you.